Hello, welcome to the Bigger Truth Podcast. I am Scott McMahon, and I've got Candace Czarny here today, and I'm so excited that Candace, I'm so excited that you're here. Just really quick, we're live on Facebook, we're live on Twitter and YouTube, and we will be the show notes will be published on Substack later today, and we'll have lots of links there that we're going to be talking about throughout the show. This is going to be, I'm super excited for this show. If you are live, you are most welcome to comment, question, whatever you like. And I can't promise that we'll respond to everything, but we'll do our best. And love us or hate us, bring it on. So, Candace, you are the chair of LD3. You're still the chair of LD3. Bob Gomez.
The official chair.
Yes. And Bob Gomez, I heard, put out some whiny complaint that you're still calling yourself the official chair and you should stop. So, so let's start actually with a piece of news that actually doesn't have that I've been sent from several people here in Michigan about Arizona, and it's Austin Smith and his talking about his signatures, and that there's a headline that he forged signatures on his petition to run for, was it State House?
Yes.
Okay. So do you know anything about that, and what's the story behind the story there?
Well, I'll do my best to give you what I know.
Okay.
Austin Smith, highly respected. The people that I know that know him say he would never forge a signature. And what you're going to hear today is, I think, will help substantiate what I'm going to say. What happened is, on the petition signatures, the front side has the people who signed the signature, who signed the petition, right? That's the front side. And then on the back side, there's a place for whoever's collecting the signatures to sign that they collected them. And often when you have people out there, and for these candidates, there are volunteers everywhere who are collecting signatures, right? And so they don't even look at the backside. They're just getting their signatures and they turn them in, right? So they turn all the signatures in. Some of them don't have a signature on the back of who did it. So, typically the candidate will sign that. I mean, that's not an unusual thing to happen. So that's what happened. Well, it turns out some of those signatures, whoever turned those in, they literally signed all the signatures on a page. And it's obvious, just by looking at it, that someone forged all those signatures, right? No one believes it was Austin Smith, but he has to take responsibility for it. So I believe someone set him up, and because that wouldn't surprise me. And I think in the end, we'll find that out. The question is, who did set him up? And there's lots of different people that could be. But I believe that he was set up. He's resigned. He's resigned from Turning Point. He's not going to be running. And it's created a big mess in LD29, which is, just one more opportunity for the disruptors, which is what we're going to talk about. And it's truly unfortunate what's happened.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And I also heard that is he on his honeymoon, or he's not?
He got married last week and he's on his honeymoon, and then this breaks. So
that's terrible. It's heartbreaking, I'm sure.
It's very sad, because he's a highly respected representative and he works really hard for our state and our country. And this is just really, truly unfortunate. But when we look at this big picture, because that's the place I've come to, because I've been in this battle for over almost 2 years now. And so when you're in it this long, you have a perspective on what's transpired that's different than people who are just walking into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we have heard from Forrest in LD26. We heard from Morgan in LD4. We heard from Tatiana in LD11. And we've heard the same story over and over again, which is MCRC, Maricopa County Republican Committee, that we'll refer to as MCRC, reaching down from above to the smaller LDs and trying to take over the LD chair election process when they don't get results that they like. And so you were elected on December 2nd, 2022. And when I interviewed Tatiana a couple days ago, she was talking about at the same exact time there were election challenges going on in the election in her LD because Julie McElwain had been removed from the executive board there. Mm-hmm. And she talked about how Brian Ference was involved in that, and Brian Ference happens to live in your LD, so you've had just a front row seat with Brian Ference. So what if you want to just kind of give the broad strokes overview of the last year plus, almost a year and a half since you got elected, and just kind of tell just kind of succinctly the whole story, just to kind of get us all caught up with how we got to where we are right now today.
Well, it's, when I first started, December 1st elected, actually, this story started before redistricting, before the first part of 2022, right? It started in LD15, and I think Basil Ference spoke a little bit about that. But the major disruptors, the handlers, and the assets, the majority of them reside. They started in LD15. When there's redistricting, it became LD3. But the majority of them reside in LD3. And so this was really kind of ground zero. And so, I had a bit of a run-in with Ference before I was elected. I truly didn't want this position. I was asked on numerous occasions to run for the chair of LD3. I didn't want to run for it. I had, when I got involved as a PC, my background's marketing. I saw a deficiency in training PCs and not just teaching them to knock on doors, but actually how to communicate with people and shift their mindset from I hate mean tweets to I love Trump. Okay. And so I created an entire training program about that. I've trained almost 1,000 PCs across Arizona. So when it came time and they were looking for a chair for LD3, that's why I believe they came to me. And I also had in LD3 before the election they'd asked me to come into LD3 and train. And I said, well, we're moving into election cycle. Let's do a get out the vote program instead. So I did a combination of training and a get out the vote program. That program in an off year, an off year election, increased voter turnout by 15%. Okay. So I was having huge success. And so people asked me to run. I ran. It wasn't on the night of December 1st of my election, they read the results of who won. The chairman said, please come to the stage so we can swear you in. And the losers refused to come to the stage. They refused to be sworn in because it was their entire slate or nothing. And so they took, I don't know, it felt like an eternity, but maybe 10, 15 minutes to debate among themselves. And finally, 3 of them came to the stage and we got sworn in. The meeting is adjourned, everyone leaves, and all of a sudden they start demanding that I want a hand count. I look at them and I go, I'm sorry, meeting adjourned, no quorum, no hand count. And so I did all of the required things, because we had a tabulator not connected to the internet. And they finished up all of the ballots. They put them in envelopes. They sealed them. I took them. I gave them to my secretary, and off we go. But they're still standing there demanding a hand count. So the gentleman who handled the tabulator gave him a floppy drive with the images. Right. So by the next morning, they knew that there was nothing wrong with the ballots, and they knew that I got an extra vote. So it went from that to proxy fraud. Right. And then once the courts, because I took them to court over this, once the court ruled there was no proxy fraud, then it became, oh, well, it's the blue cards. And a blue card just meant you had a proxy, right? So then it became the blue cards. And then after the blue cards, it became different color ink on the proxy. So one of the strategies you'll hear throughout hearing about what these people and how they do it is they're constantly moving the goalpost, right? So I'm elected. We have our meetings. And from the very first meeting, I'm sure many of your viewers have probably seen many of the videos, but they were in constant disruption. They're total go disruption. So then we get into March, and they're still not happy. Oh, we have a new board, a new MCRC board elected in January, and they decide they're going to listen to the disruptors, and they decide in March they're going to have a new election, which violates their bylaws, violates our bylaws, it violates everything, but they decide they're going to have it. And I say, no, you're not, right? So they have it. I don't acquiesce. We still have an LD. We end up having a lawsuit. The lawsuit goes for months. The judge rules there is no proxy fraud, right? And the judge rules that based on statute that the legislative district chair is the one who calls meetings. But the judge did rule that more other meetings other than the statutory meeting could be called, right? So they decide that means they won. So they still don't quit. But in the meantime, my LD is doing amazing work. We've got amazing committees. I mean, we have besides our 10-minute a day program, which is state of the art. No one's doing it except for it's now being adopted in many of the counties and LDs across the state. It's a zero cost way to have voter contact. And we've got a state of the art senior living program that's being adopted by many of the senior living facilities in LD3. We're working with our Congressman Schweikert on that. So we just have amazing work happening in our LD. And then on the Gomez gang have done nothing but censured Republicans.
Right. And that Gomez gang, that's the alternate LD3. So
yeah.
So what we have now is we've got two different LD3s, and LD3 is by far the largest LD in the whole state.
We are the largest legislative district in the state, and we're the second largest in the country.
Yeah.
We've actually got I'm responsible for 96,000 registered Republicans.
Wow.
And that means there's 3 times 9, almost 300,000 voters in my LD.
Right. So, and this covers kind of the Scottsdale all the way to Anthem. It's also a huge area. It's
40 miles wide. I mean,
yeah.
we have an LD down south that's 140 miles wide.
Wow.
But they're very sparse. But
Sure.
ours is so we have lots of people, lots of PCs, precinct committeemen. So it's huge.
We also have tremendous economic diversity. So you've got from very blue collar type areas to really the wealthiest areas in the whole state.
Correct.
All within your LD. So you've got the largest donors in the state probably, and you've got the the very blue collar, and so you've got just so much to manage within that to begin with. And from the very moment of your election, there's been nothing but conflict from these people attacking, focused on you.
Well, it started before me. It actually did. I was just I'm just a placeholder, right? The difference between me and anybody else is I'm a placeholder who does not stand down to a bully.
Sure.
Because that's who these guys are. They're bullies.
Right. So we've kind of told this story, and Lauren says, moving the goalposts and insisting that they have replaced leadership when they've been told legally they did no such thing are definitely commonalities. And Lauren is from Michigan, so there really is no one safe from censure either. It's not just people who get elected, and that's definitely what we've seen in Arizona.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'd like to talk to you, just like zoom out and get a little bit more on because we've seen the story and the pain, and I know that this has been hard and painful for you as you've been attacked personally, but let's talk about, like, a lot of this goes to the root meaning of what it even means to be a Republican, because they talk about, and on my members only podcast, which is coming shortly, I actually just finished recording it, talk about how the nexus of this whole thing is rooted in a hatred for rhinos, and how that exactly that came to be about. But this, what they call rhinos is Republicans in name only. It's used very similarly to the way that the left uses racist as a slander. And it's very, very similar, where it's the goalposts are always moving, like Lauren just said, and or they can continuously shift what it means to be a rhino, so that ultimately what a rhino is anybody within the party that disagrees with the disruptor leadership. So, so what, and from your view, from your perspective, what does it mean to be a Republican?
My goal today is to help people identify and see this coming, so that they can get ahead of the wave, because it's the only thing that we can do is get ahead of the wave, right? And so people say to me, well, who are they? Who are they? And it's the only thing I can do is I can call them disruptors, right? Because the question you have to say is, people are asking because their behavior, the definition of Republican, conservative, right? We're going to get Republicans elected, doesn't match their behavior, right? So 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4 in your mind. So it keeps coming back. Well, who are they? They're Republicans, but that's bad behavior. They're Republicans. And so the mind goes back and forth. It's called cognitive dissonance. And your mind can't find resolution until it makes sense of the equation, right? And so the challenge with the equation is everyone's assuming they're Republicans because they say they are. Mm-hmm. Republicans don't censure other Republicans. Republicans don't spend full time attacking other Republicans. Republicans attack Democrats. These guys are not attacking Democrats. They're only attacking Republicans. So they can't be Republicans. They can't be. And that's where the equation is. I said, the moment, one of the long-term chairs, I interviewed a lot of the chairs when I started, because I wanted to know what the best practices were. What has worked for you? What happens here? And one of the great tips that I got is, Candace, if there's an action item, right? Something's happening. You ask yourself, does this action help get Republicans elected? If the answer to that is yes, you do it, right? The next question is, does it, if it doesn't help Republicans, then you move on and it's next, right? So if the censures are not helping Republicans, you don't do it, right? If going after an LD chair isn't helping Republicans, you don't do it. It's a very simple equation. And so when you're watching behavior in your legislative district and in your delegates, or whatever your state or city calls them, you have to ask yourself that one simple question. Does this behavior help get Republicans elected? And that's how you know. That's how you know what's happening in your organization. Because if it's not, we only have one job. We have one job, and that is to get good Republicans elected. Finding good candidates, the right time, the right place. And that statement's going to be important as we get into the story.
Sure,
right?
Sure. Lauren says that's an excellent point. We tend to accept people's word that they're Republicans, but disruptive, bullying, purging behavior is usually Democrat, not Republican behavior. Yeah. And very well put. So, what there are some really big, in talking about also identifying these people, we're talking about their goals, their methods, and also their connections with other people. So talking about their methods, and which you just kind of touched on, one aspect is, and this is the reason why I call it a cult, is because they use religious language. They use the Bible, and I've said this many times, they use the Bible as a weapon against their own followers, as a tool to manipulate them into listening and receiving whatever it is that they have to say and trusting them. So they use it as a manipulative weapon to build trust and credibility, but also to confuse their followers into believing some things that just aren't true. That they share scripture that says that, for example, that the enemy is all around you. And they say that is the case. The enemy is all around you, and it's within the Republican Party. And they say that you're in a holy war, and they say that God is on your side. And like Lincoln said, I don't claim that God is on my side. God is always right. I'm not always right. The best I can hope for is that God might be on my side. And that is an honest statement about
that
God.
I'm doing God's work.
That's right. And so one thing that you were actually the first person that said this to me, you said that they pray and then they pray. What did you mean by that?
Well, I want to define it a little bit before I tell you what that means.
Okay.
Right? Many of the people who are involved in this are good patriots. They love their country. They love their God. They love their family. They feel like they're doing the right thing. But the leaders in this disruptor organization are using the emotion of these good people and turning it against them, right? Because when you're emotional, you become emotionally charged. You start making emotional decisions. And what I would say for these people is that, if you're in a situation and you're getting worked up and someone's feeding on your anger, right? You have to ask yourself, because this is what happens. They get people so worked up with their anger that they force people to violate their own moral code, right? And so they use religion to help them justify violating their moral code and violating the rule of law. I mean, these people in the big picture, I believe their goal is to create tyranny, to create a civil war in this country. That is their goal. Because if we go there, we lose, right? When you see someone get mad and angry and write a nasty gram like Bob Gomez just did, it's because they're losing. When people get angry, it's because they're losing. And they want to get our people, our good, hardworking, country-loving patriots, so angry that they reach out and do things that aren't in their best interest, right? And when they use scripture to get someone to justify going against the moral fiber of what they know is right? And they're using scripture to do that. You're being manipulated.
Yep.
That's what anyone listening to this has to know. If you get that twinge inside and you're doing something and you go, oh, it's not quite right, but you're doing it because you're told, then they're given that scripture, you have to listen to that voice inside of you that says that little twinge that goes, yeah, that's not quite right? Yep. Because this is how they do it. And you go to an event and they get you on your knees and they get you to pray and they talk about getting rid of the demons and casting them out. And they just get them all worked up, right? And then they get off their knees when they're finished praying, PRAYING, and they send them out to pray, PREY.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This is how they do it.
Yep. Exactly. And that's how, we see, Jim O'Connor claims to be he's really the self-appointed spiritual guru of this whole thing.
Yes.
And every time I hear Jim O'Connor's name or see a picture of him, I think of the meeting that you guys had in September of last year where Nancy Ordowski gave that speech. And I talked about it with Basil, and she's talking about the Saul Alinsky tactics that are being employed and how it's got to stop. And these people just freaked out. But Jim O'Connor in particularly just started screaming, "I'm Jim O'Connor and I demand that you stop." And, and it was just unbelievable. I mean, that is not the pastor at the church at which I was saved. He often says, it's okay to ask, but not demand. When he talks about what he teaches his children, it's okay to ask, but it's not okay to demand. And that's really a fundamental Christian principle, actually. To understand that.
One thing I'll add in that is, we'll talk more about MCRC, but when you talk about MCRC, it's really, they have gotten to the place where they believe they're a monarchy, right? Which is Old England, right? Ruled by the kings. And the monarchs, who gave the monarchs power?
Well, they believe
it was divine power from God, right? Well, this is, because Jim O'Connor claims that God has told him that he is going to be the AZ GOP chair. This is a true monarchy. This is who he thinks he is. He thinks he's divinely given the right to be the AZ GOP because God told him.
Right, which makes him an evil and demonic prophet. Objectively, I mean that's what he's made himself to be. So, and I will definitely stand him. He wants to try to sue me for that. I would love to do that. Awesome. I'd love the discovery. So, so here we got Lauren says, I believe we're being relentlessly prodded to get us to respond unwisely so that we can be punished and the other side can claim some kind of justification. That's exactly overtly what especially Brian Ference does. And that's what he did to Dan Farley and getting Dan Farley to push him.
He tried it against me in one of our meetings.
Yeah.
Almost did. He demanded that the police arrest me.
That was when he took the microphone. He wouldn't give it back to you, right?
Yes.
Unbelievable. And yeah, so there is so much that we can cover, and we've had, how many hours do you think we've spent on the phone, Candace?
I don't know. Many. Yeah. I feel like you're an old friend.
And so, and there's, and I think, and every time we talk, there's new stuff that comes up and new ideas and insights, and it's just awesome. And we've covered some of the things, but I really want to get into the operators because that's really where my focus is, because it's not, there's the followers, and it's very easy to talk about the bad things that the followers do, is that they've been made to behave in a way that is completely contradicts what they actually hold dear.
Yes.
And they're working to, as they are, like you said, these are good God-fearing patriots, and they love their God and they love their country, and yet they're behaving in a way that is destroying this country and destroying this party, and they don't even know it.
They're being deceived.
Right. And so let's talk about the deceivers, and let's kind of just jump right into that. And do you want to talk about your graphic that you created?
Wherever you want to go.
Let's go to this graphic. And so you sent this to me. And so and this is really focused on, right at the middle is this disruptor cult MCRC. And so we're talking primarily because there's the group in MCRC, and the disruptors are also working with various degrees of success in other counties, and I will be covering that in the future. But we're focused on MCRC right now, and because MCRC has power, and also because they have power over 2/3 of all the county in which 2/3 of all the voters in Arizona reside. So that's kind of where we're at. So how would you like to break this down? Because I think that this is, if the audience can understand where what you are communicating with this graphic, they'll get a very high level of understanding of how, what's going on within the party right now.
Well, I put this together because it was hard for me. When you're in the middle of it, when you're under attack and they're defaming your character and who you are, and at every turn you wake up every day, and every day it's a new battle, right? And their objective is their objective is to keep you so busy fighting all of the little battles, and I see this happening everywhere, that you don't really see the big picture. You don't know what's happening. And when I first started in here in December 1st of 22, that was me. I was every day trying to put out battles. I was at war. And it took me a while to get to a place where I had to, and even when I put this graphic together, it took me weeks to really drill it down so I could put it on a page, mm-hmm. Right? But it's about disruption, right? This is, the issues we're talking about are the rule of law. Our government, right, was founded on our Constitution, which has 3 branches of government. And it has 3 branches of government specifically so that they all oversee each other, right? And what you're going to see in this, what's happened is that these disruptors have moved it from the rule of law to the rule of man. And they're rewriting all the rules. They're violating Arizona statutes, and they're violating their own bylaws and the bylaws of every single legislative district in Maricopa County. And there's a video out of Steve Daniels that talks about the strategy on how they're going to take over the Republican Party. And this is exactly how they've done it, right? So the disruptors went after Maricopa County, and they went after LD3 first because Brian Ference lives in LD3, I think, but also because we're the largest county, right? When you take over LD3 and all the voters in LD3, that's a huge chunk. I mean, if you compare my LD to, let's say, Shelby Bush's LD, right? I have 750 positions for PCs. Her last count, she might have 20, 25. I mean, I don't, it's minute, right? And she hasn't appointed one PC in her entire reign. Anyway, I divert. So in this graphic, we're going to start with the disruptor cult, because that's what it is. And it is MCRC. And it started back in 2022. We had the redistricting. No one really knew who Brian Ference and Liz Harris and those people were at the time, right? But they were elected. If you look at that, the first orange box in the middle, right? They were elected in January of 2022 as a member at large, which gives them a voting position at MCRC. And January 2022, right after that, we had redistricting, right? And that's when Brian Ference merged with LD23 and LD1, right? And Brian Ference and his crew already took over LD15, right? They started their strategy there. They were successful. They brought it into LD3. And then the next box.
They were also successful, as we talked about with Tatiana and LD11,
yes.
being a new on. And the timing was actually the same, because right around then they were trying to create a new to force you to have a new election right after Christmas as well.
Yes, and I mean they were trying to force a new election on the exact same day, 27th, 28th, something like that. Mm-hmm. And they even our treasurer actually removed our names from the bank account, and I have a letter from the bank that says such. Okay,
so they stole the treasurer. So this is the treasurer that was elected to LD3.
Be careful what you say so you don't get sued.
Well,
but the facts are he removed the secretary and I, the three signers on the bank account, and he removed our signatures. Mm-hmm. He removed our names off the account so that we couldn't have access.
And he gave and he put the signatures they put on there was Bob Gomez, the alternate group.
No, that happened. So he took our names off in December. We went back to the bank. We got our names put back onto the bank in January. And then in March, when they had the new election for LD3, Bob Gomez and those guys they actually took the bank account. They took the entire account and about $3,800.
Well, I'll say it. I mean, that's called theft. I mean, when you take someone else's money, that's called theft. So
well, they did. They took our money.
Yeah. So
holding an election.
Right. So then you had to form a new bank account?
Yes.
Yeah.
And in that process, because we were still trying to resolve this situation, we end up having to sue MCRC. And at some point in time, I don't remember when it was, we were hoping to get resolution, and eventually we just reorganized ourselves and got a new bank account.
Okay, so to kind of orient a little bit more on this graphic, so the orange, it says here in the key, it says that they're in the bottom right, it says disruptors. So Berland, Bush, this is Craig Berland, the MCRC chair, Shelby Bush, the first vice chair, Brian Ference, Liz Harris, who's running for RNC committee woman next week, and Hudson, who's talk about Hudson. Who's he?
Lawrence Hudson, I think he's the treasurer, but he's the one responsible for the appointment of PCs. And one of the strategies they've been using is it's kind of like stuff in the ballot box, right? These people who call themselves election integrity, throughout this whole story, there's nothing that's about election integrity. So how they stuff the ballot box is, the chairman of the MCRC is the person who can appoint PCs if there's a vacant PC position. And there are vacant PC positions all over Maricopa County. And so in my case, and in many of the LDs, the chairman, who is the one who submits that to the MCRC, Lawrence Hudson was not appointing our PCs, but he was appointing other PCs. So they were selectively appointing PCs. Well, if you think about that, what they're doing, they're selectively appointing, so their base of voters is growing, right? So their base of voters in the LD is growing, and yours is shrinking. So that when they force a vote to change a bylaw or remove someone from office, they now have more votes because they've been stuffing the ballot box by appointing PCs.
Right. And they don't allow you to appoint PCs.
Correct.
They only allow those appointments to come from Bob Goins. This is just, it's absolutely sick. It is.
Well, and then another player in this, and look, I don't know if they're complicit or they're just ignorant, but Turning Point has been appointing, they have all these events and they get people to sign up to be PCs, and they're sending them into MCRC. And I didn't get one. They went all to MCRC, and then MCRC feeds them the Kool-Aid, the disruptor Kool-Aid. And so they're helping them build this disruptor army.
So Turning Point is actively recruiting for the disruptors at MCRC.
Well, that's all I can say is Turning Point is actively recruiting, and they're sending those recruits to MCRC.
Okay.
Whether they're complicit or they're ignorant, I can't tell you that.
Right. Okay. Well, Turning Point, you have no excuse. You are you're making this problem worse by sending these delegates, these PCs, to MCRC. MCRC is a cancer within the Arizona Republican Party. And as long as, if you continue going forward now, if you continue to do this, engage in this, you have no excuse. And we can only assume that you're being complicit. Here is Turning Point is 100% complicit, says Anchor Baby Abe. And now Austin Smith just committed signature fraud. And like we said, maybe he knew about it, maybe he didn't. But and I don't know that
you don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know that everyone within Turning Point is part of the game. And I don't know that Charlie Kirk even knows what's going on. We don't know, but there is Charlie Kirk certainly has contributed to the narratives that have resulted in what's going on here. So, and there are many, many false narratives that even like I talked about with Sheila last night, Sheila Muehling, the former AZGOP treasurer, that the idea that you should no longer, that nobody should donate money to the Republican Party anymore, give it to Turning Point instead. I mean, that was an idea that was actively advanced, and that's that's one of the many causes. I'm not saying it's the only cause, but that's one of the many causes of this. That there was the notion, the narrative that we should no longer donate to the Republican Party is a big part, if not the biggest part of the cause of the financial problems in all of the state GOPs. And now we're looking at Turning Point having more funds than all of the state GOPs combined.
Well, and there is, in Washington, we all complain because it's pay to play, right? We send our representatives there and they're making a reasonable income. And in a couple of years, they're multimillionaires. You got to ask, right? But this is happening inside the GOP. We have players who are voting members of the AZGOP who are getting paid by other organizations.
Right.
So who are they voting for?
Right.
Are they voting for the PCs? Are they voting for the Republican Party? Are they voting for the voters, the Republican voters? Or are they voting based upon who's paying them? It's a problem.
That is a huge problem. We're seeing that here. So, and to that extent, we've talked offline about the involvement. So Shelby Bush is the first vice chair of MCRC. She has a PAC called We the People Arizona Alliance PAC. And that PAC has received money from MCRC.
I haven't seen that, but she has received money from Patrick Byrne.
Okay.
I know that. And I believe she's received money from the pillow guy.
So so maybe it was that Craig Berland proposed that $250,000 be sent to We the People Arizona Alliance.
Oh, absolutely. That was a proposal that was made to the board.
Okay.
And when people became up in arms about MCRC giving $250,000 to We the People, that got shut down.
Okay.
When you look at We the People, you'll see that the money that they have gotten have come from different sources, right? But Shelby Bush has paid her boyfriend, Steve Robinson, I think last year it was up to $75,000.
Yeah. And this is her boyfriend. She's married to someone else. And as far as I can tell, I've not been able to find a divorce decree anywhere. I believe that they're still married, and she has a boyfriend that is apparently always at her side and that gets paid by her PAC.
Well, the other thing I want to mention about her boyfriend, Steve Robinson, is you had the interview with Basil, and Basil talked about the 3%ers, and her boyfriend is a 3%er. That ties directly to what Basil was talking about.
Absolutely. And what Basil was talking about, the role of the 3%ers, which is a militia organization, which is highly infiltrated by, we don't necessarily know who, but
right.
In seeing what happened as far as the FBI deliberate and systematic FBI infiltration of militia groups here in Michigan, that really where the FBI cooked up the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot and framed a few people into going along and give them enough marijuana that they'd go along with it. And then they convicted. And now people, and many voters throughout the country actually believe that Gretchen Whitmer was actually kidnapped, which is just, the whole thing is bonkers nuts. But there is infiltration. The FBI and other three-letter organization infiltration militia groups is pretty widely understood and accepted. And so, I'm not saying that Steve Robinson is an FBI agent or anything like that. I don't know, but
no, I just know he's a 3%er.
Yeah, and it's just highly suspect. And what the 3%ers ultimately, their overriding message, like I talked about with Basil, is that there are no political solutions to our problems. And what that means is that the government actually needs to be overthrown. And so if we have somebody that is of that belief, that's involved, that's that close to the first vice chair of MCRC, that just raises questions and very good questions. So
and Basil did attach the 3%ers to Steve Daniels.
That's right.
Which is the guy who did the video on how to take down the Republican Party from the inside.
That's right.
That's not a good picture.
And who ran for state chair, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Which is just, it's crazy. Forrest Woodwick, love you, Forrest. He says Christian Lamar has been very active in recruiting PCs and indoctrinating them into issuing censures as a means to fix our election process. And I have seen that. He goes on many of these podcasts, different podcasts, talking about this. He's very smooth talker, and he's really recruiting specifically almost zero information PCs. Like he's getting people that the message is actually kind of similar to Michelle Obama's message in 2020, saying, I don't care if you don't know nothing about nothing, get out there and vote. and I wouldn't say that that's exactly his message, but that from what I've seen, the videos that I've seen of him recruiting delegates, he's not talking about what it really means to be a PC. It's the same message that was advanced here. All you have to do is go to a meeting or two every year, and you'll save the state and country for future generations. And that's the message. And honest people on our side have trouble giving a message like that, because you can't. It's hard to compete with that message, because it's so tempting. It's like, okay, why not? I'll be a PC. But it's actually a lot more involved in that. And so what we need is people that are willing to make that commitment. So let's go back to the graphic here.
It's so easy to get waylaid on this subject because it's such a deep well.
Yeah, it is. So, but we're covering really important stuff. So we've kind of talked about the orange, the disruptors, and then let's skip ahead to Kerry Lake. and let's talk about Kari Lake's endorsement of these and her role in really getting these people into power within the party.
So when I started putting this together, my objective was I wanted to see who's who in the zoo, right? Who is my enemy, right? Who am I fighting? And, so I start with the disruptors and who they were, the people elected, the mouths that were elected in 22, the officers elected in 23, which is Berlin and Bush and Hudson, right? And then, because there's a for your viewers, every January, there is a mandatory or a statutory meeting every year. And the county has a meeting and the state has a meeting. So in 2023, the county has their meeting and they elect their officers, which are Berlin, Bush, and Hudson. And then 2 weeks later, the state has their meeting to elect their officers, right? So in 2023, the officers elected were, they elected DeWitt because Kari Lake came out on stage and says, Trump supports DeWitt. And that was when he ran against Steve Daniels, right? Which is the guy who wants to take down the Republican Party from within. And this is important because when he loses, that's when they really start the strategy of taking the party down from the bottom instead of the top, okay? And when you look across this map at all the orange boxes, you will see that Kari Lake has endorsed all of them. Was she ignorant? I don't know. Was she complicit? I don't know. But it's not a good picture, right? Because she has endorsed every single disruptor candidacy against good, hardworking Republicans that would be doing amazing work today to get Republicans elected. But she endorsed every single one of them, right? And if you look at what happened with DeWitt, you have to add that into the Kari Lake story because DeWitt is elected in January of 23, right? And Kari Lake has lost. And she's doing her national tour on election, how the election was stolen. Look, I worked the audit. I did canvassing with Liz Harris, okay? I know from what I experienced that the election was stolen, okay? But that is not going to help us get Republicans elected. Do we need to fix it? Yes, we do. But until we have a Republican as a governor or we have a supermajority, we're not going anywhere. We're not getting anything fixed, right? So I put my effort and my focus on getting Republicans elected.
And the thing that's absolutely insane is that these disruptor people, they're going on and on right now today. And I've seen it even in the last few weeks saying we need paper ballots, we need one-day voting, we need no machines and hand counts, and it's just like after Biden was inaugurated, there was no path to a remedy that included taking Biden out of the White House, and any lawsuit that asked for that as a legal remedy was designed to fail. And because it was just an impossible remedy. And they're doing the same thing right here, saying that we need to get rid of the machines. And first of all, I don't think that the machines are the problem. That's not, at least I know that it's not the main problem. And
right. There's many facets to the stealing of an election.
But the narrative of the machines being the problem and that we have to get rid of the machines, the people who propagate that narrative, all of them who continue to do so, they are part of the network, the Flynn network, the Bannon network, the Lindell network. It's all kind of the same network that is seeking that advances these narratives. It's a narrative that's designed to make voters so hopeless that they won't go out and vote. They're trying. It is a campaign for Democrats that's being advanced by all these people who say that they're Republicans and that they say that they're far right Republicans. This is a campaign for Democrats to discourage Republicans from voting. Because like you said, there is only one way that we can solve our election problem, and that's to elect Republicans. And anybody that's not talking about that as the only solution is part of the problem.
So if we got rid of the machines tomorrow, they're still going to cheat.
That's
right. We still have voter roll issues.
That's right.
we still have ballot stuffing issues. Okay.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
just getting rid of the machines is not going to solve the problem. Look, there's a lot that needs to be done for election integrity,
Yeah.
but now is not the time for that. Now
right.
is the time for getting Republicans elected. That's just the bottom line.
Right.
And one of my beefs with Kari Lake is I have sent this message to her campaign over and over and over when she's been going across the country convincing everyone that our elections are fraudulent. She's right. They are. There's a problem. But you can't just convince everybody not to vote. And that is what she's done. I run into voters every single day, and they tell me, well, why should I vote? My vote doesn't count. Why should I vote? My vote doesn't count. And my answer to them is, if you don't vote, they only have to steal one ballot. If you do vote, they have to steal two. Okay? So you have to vote. Sure. It's the only way is you have to vote. And I wish Kari would have a long time ago, because she could say there's an election problem and we need to fix it, but you still have to vote.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You still have to vote. It's the only way we can win. We can't win if we don't vote.
That's right.
And so, I'm completely frustrated that she's done that. She's now twisted that a little bit, but she's still after the election stuff, and she's not really, telling people. The biggest message we have for voters here in Arizona is you have to vote. We know 350,000 Republican voters got mail-in ballots and they left them on the kitchen table. We know that for a fact. Okay? That's a problem.
Yep.
Our one job in this election is, one, you have to vote. Two, you have to vote in the primary. The primary is where you get to vote for your candidate, right? Because come the general, if we're going to take our country back, you must vote top to bottom Republican ticket. I don't care if your candidate didn't make it. I vote for a lot of candidates where I have to hold my nose, okay? But they're my Republican, they're my guy. That's my Republican candidate, and I'm voting for him. I voted for the guy I wanted in the primary. That's where it is. You have three jobs. You got to vote. You got to vote in the primary, and you have to vote in the general. I'm sorry.
That's an excellent rant. I completely 1,000% agree. And that issue of voting down ballot is a big part of the way in which these grassroots are really making themselves the ass roots. By not voting down ballot, they apply these purity tests, and they say, if you're not 100% with me, I'd rather a Democrat be elected than a lying rhino. And it's just, that is complete and total hogwash. So even the worst of rhinos is probably going to agree with you 50% of the time, and that would be the very worst. But any Democrat today that's running for office you're probably going to agree with 0% of the time. At best, maybe 10%. And so it is just complete and total insanity. It is absolute stupidity and illogical. And that's part of the operation. The psyop that we're dealing with here is in any psyop, when you are brainwashed if you reject logic. Mm-hmm. And so if you listening to this believe in this lie that it's better to let Democrats win and to stay home because there's no point in voting, you have been brainwashed into rejecting logic and reason. And
that's the Steve Daniels program.
That's right. Yeah, and it's the program. It's the Mike Labadie program here in Michigan, and who was the shadow operator behind Christina Caramo, who I believe is very very similar to Kari Lake. There's so many similarities to Kari Lake. I think that Christina Caramo actually was a pretty good person before she met Mike Labadie, and I think that Kari Lake was a pretty good candidate until she brought Caroline Wren onto her team in August of 22. And it was really after that she really, after the primary, you're supposed to get broaden your scope and, kind of, make your really try to appeal to a wider audience. But she did the opposite, just like Christina Caramo did. She intended to lose her Secretary of State race. I believe that Kari Lake intended to lose her gubernatorial race. And, how else could you explain going out and telling a big portion of your Republican electorate to go to hell and that you don't want their vote? And that's what she was doing with John McCain supporters.
And when we get through this graphic on Kari Lake, you're going to see how she's alienated another third of the party.
Great. Well, let's do it.
So we were talking into the January 2023, right? We have the mandatory election for MCRC. We elect Bush, Berlin, Hudson, right? Ference and Harris are already on board because they were elected the year before. 2 weeks later, we have the AZ GOP election for chair, right? Steve Daniels runs and DeWitt runs. There were a bunch of other people who did the right thing. They dropped out and they put their support behind DeWitt because we knew we needed DeWitt over Steve Daniels, right? But if you look at the timeline, DeWitt's elected in January. Kari Lake comes out on stage and says, Trump supports DeWitt, because DeWitt, I mean, he helped in Trump's campaign. I mean, he was in the White House, right? This is a Trump guy through and through. So January, he gets elected. February, he owns a company. He steps down from his company. So there's not a pay to play, right, for AZ GOP. And Kari Lake lost in 2022. And, so he gives Kari Lake a job, right? First of all, she has no corporate background. The only thing Kari Lake has ever done has been on television interviewing people and recording people. So what does she do? She takes a job with DeWitt. She's making over $100,000 a year. That's in February.
For a part-time.
Pardon?
For a part-time job.
Yeah, a part-time job.
Yeah.
So she gets a paycheck from DeWitt, and then I think it is in April is the famous recording the edited recording she put out. That was made in like April of 23, right? She's working for DeWitt, and she makes this recording. I'm going to make a prediction here. I have really good information that when that recording comes out, you're going to hear that. Because I remember at this point in time, Kari Lake had lost in 22, and she's going around the country talking about what happened and how her election was stolen. And she's propping herself up to be VP for Trump. That's what she's propping herself up for. Well, right around here in April, DeWitt, that's what this phone conversation was about. She was not going to be VP. Trump's team wanted her to be governor in 26. And they said, Kari, why don't you be Trump's spokesperson? You can sit in your basement and be online during the day doing, stuff for him, and you can run for governor in 26. That's what this offer was about. And you're going to hear that. That's what's going to come out. I'm predicting it, right? And
can I interject in something that actually would support that theory?
Okay.
So I have heard from a source, it's one of my protected sources that I can't divulge, because that was right around the time that Kari Lake went out to Mar-a-Lago with Caroline Wren. And at that time, and that was very well publicized because it was all about, and it was distributed by the whole Steve Bannon, Mike Flynn podcaster news network, and that whole network of podcasters and media people, that she was going to be the VP. Trump was going to pick her to be the VP. And she went out to Mar-a-Lago. She was out there for several days and meeting with them all the time. And, there are all these pictures taken of them having lunch together. And, she's looking all business-like. And, like they're rolling up their sleeves. They're getting to work, plotting their campaign together. And a lot of that, I believe, was driven by Caroline Wren, who has a very close relationship with Steve Bannon and appears on Steve Bannon almost every week. Like she's really on Steve Bannon's show a lot. And she really clearly wanted to be the chief of staff for the vice president. And so, this was going on. But there was one person that had a huge problem with Kari Lake, and that was Melania. That, from what I understand, Melania hated Kari Lake.
I heard too.
And okay, so it's not just my source, but she could not stand Kari Lake, and she told her husband, Donald, you got to get rid of her. And this is the part of the story that I love, because it just shows that he's just a real man. Like he's like, okay, I got to get rid of her, but how am I going to do it gently and softly? Yes. He didn't know at that point that before she went out there, Kari Lake had told Sheriff Lamb that he should run for senator.
Yes.
And
I heard that Lamb discussed that with Trump.
Okay.
I heard.
Okay. but I think it was, I don't think that Trump knew at that point that Lamb had decided that he was going to run. He had already decided at that point that he was going to run for senator, largely with Kari Lake's blessing. And so Trump said, okay, well, I got to get rid of her. Let me let her down softly. So he told her, why don't you run for Senate? And I'll endorse you, just to kind of totally clear the air from this whole VP run for Senate, and I'll endorse you. And so that was the start of the whole thing. And then, so if that happened right before, and I'm not certain exactly the timing, that versus the recording, but if that did happen before that recording, then I could see like that would be Trump, because he's not going to renege on his endorsement, but he might try to encourage someone to change, to do something different. And the reality is I was listening to that recording with Steve DeWitt. I think he was completely right. Like that advice for her to step down and to run for governor in 26 was the best possible advice. We had an excellent candidate in Sheriff Lamb. Why not support him? And also we've got, and I suspect that part of the reason why there was kind of a little bit of a stench around Kari Lake is because of Caroline Wren. And so, you kind of just get her out of the picture right now, more distance also from Steve Bannon, who Trump keeps at arm's length because Steve Bannon was really toxic in his presidency when he was the chief of staff there, from every account that I've read. And so, let's create a little distance and let's, have some sanity here in this race. And also because it's clear that she did not want to win her gubernatorial race. And I don't think that she wants
mistakes.
Right. And the way she's behaving, I don't think she wants to win the general for the Senate, at least the people behind her.
Well, let's get through the graph and we'll show you what that looks like.
All right, let's do it.
Why you think that? So
amazing.
Give me the graph so I can talk about it.
Yeah. It's coming. Sorry, there we go.
Okay, so it's in April where she actually records that conversation of DeWitt, right? So he gives her a job in February, and it's April she records that conversation, right? Where Trump's trying to let her down easy, right? He wants her because she could have made a good governor, right? With what we knew then, right? Now I don't think she has the leadership skills, or she has because leadership is the number one thing we're lacking in our country. In Washington, in our state, we're lacking good leaders. This is why everyone loves Trump. They've had the experience. They know he can lead in difficult times, and they trust he will lead, and they trust he will do what he says he's going to do, right? If that's what leadership looks like. Kari Lake doesn't have that. She might be great online. She may be great at responding, but she doesn't have leadership qualities. At least that's my personal opinion. And I probably shouldn't even be saying that. Okay, I'll move on. Anyway, so May, we go from April where she makes the recording. May, she follows DeWitt into a restaurant. He's eating dinner and she starts attacking him with a video, and she's got a video camera up. Okay, so something's going on, right? She's not happy. So we get down into the end of January. That's January 23. Now, DeWitt does get elected because Trump endorses him. Kari comes out on stage and says Trump endorses DeWitt. So he gets elected, right? That's in 23. Then we go through all the stuff that, Kari did, right? And then we get into January. We're going to have more elections. We're going to have the Mal elections, and we're going to have the Mal elections, and we'll have some more AZ GOP elections, right? So towards the end of 23, Ference and his crew, well, they've been attacking everybody, nonstop. Okay, I don't even talk about it because it's just kind of like everyday stuff. If you're even listening to Ference, right? He's been attacking every chair, censuring every legislator, and MCRC's been complicit in all of this. I mean, in this process, they censured 18 legislators. I mean, it's like, really? They haven't done one thing to get out the vote. Not one, right? Yep. So we're moving into December, And so we're getting ready for the elections in January. And Ference started to try to get a petition signed to have DeWitt removed, right? Everyone liked DeWitt, right? And they hated Ference. Ference could not be successful in getting the petition signed, right? He tried to get petitions signed against me. He couldn't get them, right? Because my people liked me. And because I was giving PCs what they needed, right? They need opportunities and they need tools to get out the vote. So I was providing that, so they liked me for that. And then, so January comes along.
And this is January, this just a
January 24, this last January 24. And
can I interject one other thing in that time frame that I'm privy to, which is, so the America Project, who is the primary funder of Shelby Bush and her We the People Arizona Alliance, they're also involved in many other states, including here in Michigan. They actually sent an operator who has a military intelligence background that I know personally from Michigan, who has worked for the America Project. He was there in December with We the People Arizona Alliance. He admitted this to me. He said, because he was helping them with building security, because there'd been a drive-by shooting in the area, which is an absurd cover story. Because, why would they fly somebody from out of state to talk about building security? There's plenty of building security experts.
Her boyfriend's a 3%er. I mean,
exactly. So, he was there in December, and he's a strategist. Like, that's part of who he is. He's a strategist. And so he was there. My guess, and this is a guess, my opinion, is that he was there in order to help Shelby Bush, Brian Ference, and all of them strategize for what was to come. So I'll let you carry on that.
So what was to come in January, they were unsuccessful in getting petitions to remove DeWitt. And we all knew that they wouldn't be successful at that. Mm-hmm. So they declared war on DeWitt. Everybody they knew were sending texts, emails. They were online talking about how DeWitt needed to resign, that, DeWitt all do things. And I mean, they were just pummeling. I mean, just relentless against him, right? And he was doing everything he could for the Republican Party. Okay, did we have problems? Yeah, we had some problems. But he provided leadership. Okay, he was providing leadership for the party. Mm-hmm. And he knew about the problems that we have in the party, right? And so he's being attacked. So what happens? DeWitt has a fundraising event scheduled with Donald Trump coming to Phoenix the night before our AZGOP convention, right? Just days. I mean, they had been relentless on DeWitt. And Kari Lake rises again, and she releases the audio on DeWitt. I mean, there is no coincidence. If you follow Bannon, there are no coincidences, right? Kari Lake was complicit in this. She knew exactly what they were doing, because the disruptors' plan was to, we're going to kind of add a new player in here. The disruptors' plan was Gina Swoboda, our election integrity expert, who, when it comes to election integrity, I think in the state, she's done more. She's worked with the legislature. She knows the EPM backwards and forwards. Kudos for her on the work she's done. Okay. She wanted to be the national committee woman because we have our state convention coming up, right? That's the word. Jean wants to be national committee woman. And this is going to take us, we're going to slide back just a moment into December, because in December of 2023, they're still trying to get rid of me. And so MCRC holds a tribunal on me, and they call me everything they booked. They lie about this, they lie about that. And MCRC, 2/3 of them just are in lockstep with Shelby and Ference. So they hold a tribunal on me. The next week, the AZGOP has their executive committee meeting, and the executive committee is appalled by MCRC's behavior. they've pretty much had it with MCRC, and they have concerns because MCRC is so large that they're starting to make the vote of the counties moot, right? So the counties are not happy with MCRC, and they're not happy what they've done to me because I have the largest legislative district, right? I have more votes at the state convention than any other LD, okay? Well, maybe I'm not going to say more than I'd have to look at that very close. Okay. And so they hold a tribunal on me. The next week, there's an executive committee meeting of the AZ GOP. Well, there's a resolution put forward that reinstates me as the LD3 chair because LD3 submitted a majority of elected PC petitions where my elected PCs voted. They signed a petition that said, yes, Candace is the official LD3 chair. That was sent to AZGOP. The executive committee voted 2-1 that I am the official LD3 chair, right? 2-1. Who voted against that? Gina Swoboda, who wants to be the national committee woman, and Tyler Boyer. Turning Point, national committeeman. They voted against me. Now, they say, well, we didn't have enough information. Well, you could have abstained. You could have abstained. You didn't. You voted against me being the official LD3 chair, against Judge Moskowitz, who said I am the LD3 chair. Okay? So that happens in December. So moving into January, the disruptor plan, right? Gina Swoboda is going to be the national committee woman we're going to vote for coming up here in April. And they're going to take out DeWitt and they're going to install the monarch, Jim O'Connor, right? That's their plan. And they think they can pull it off, right? So they harass DeWitt to the point, they release, Carrie Lake's involved because she releases the audio recording and she threatens him that there's more coming. I mean, you know, when you work with someone and they're an employee and you've spent years, at least a year with them, you can't remember everything you ever said to anybody. You don't know what she's going to have and what else she's going to edit and put out. I mean, look, this guy is married. He has children. He has a family. He's got to make a living. I don't blame him. If I had had an opportunity, I would have told him, please do not resign, but he did. So he got ousted. So now the spot's open for Jim O'Connor, right? MCRC has their meeting. Jim O'Connor does not serve on the board of MCRC, but they put him on stage and they violate their own bylaws by having Jim O'Connor run the entire county meeting. He does his audition for AZGOP chair, right? Oh. Now DeWitt's gone. They've got him placed and lined up just to move right into DeWitt's spot. Gina's going to be the national committee woman. They got it all laid out. DeWitt has resigned. Trump, the night before, says, okay, I'm not going to come and do a fundraiser there. Do you blame him? This is a mess, right? But what he does do is he steps up and goes, not Jim O'Connor. We'll put Gina in that spot. So what happens? Gina has been supporting the disruptors, and she throws Jim O'Connor under the bus, and she takes his position. And, Carrie Lake, who's been supporting the disruptors, comes out on stage with Gina Swoboda to support her. I mean, you want to talk about these people flip-flopping? How loyal are they? They're not. Mm-hmm. They're absolutely not.
So when Carrie Lake was booed at that convention, there were, a lot of headlines about that, her being booed. The interesting thing then is that she was booed by everybody. She was booed by the disruptors for being a flip-flopper and for dissing Jim O'Connor. And she was booed by everyone else because they knew that she wanted to endorse Jim O'Connor. And for her own role and all of this happened.
A third voted because they didn't want Jim O'Connor. Right. And then there was a third, actually more than a third voted because they didn't want Jim O'Connor. But the other thing you have to remember is it was a 2-1 vote. It was like, I can't remember the exact numbers, but a third of the population voted against Trump and for Jim O'Connor. The true disruptors voted against Trump because Trump endorsed Swoboda. So these disruptors, they can tell you they support Trump. They can tell you they're Trumpers, but the hardcore disruptors, those are the ones who are at the meeting.
Sure.
Those hardcore disruptors say they support Trump, and they do not. They voted against him.
Right.
They voted against Trump and for O'Connor. That ought to frighten everyone. If you're aligning with these disruptors and you're listening to this, you need to take a good look of how they've lied to you and deceived you, because they are not supporting Trump.
Well, and I think that they clearly are liars and deceivers. And also I would push back a little bit on that, because they're technically voting against his endorsement, not against him directly, which,
Yes.
I am doing by having Sheriff Lamb on the show and by advocating against Kari Lake. So, I too am, but, also I think we've explained how in a way, Trump didn't have all the information when he made that endorsement, and he was doing that to please his wife. So, it is. And also too, I was told that Trump didn't. He was told actually by someone appealed to Ronna, somebody that was close to Ronna McDaniel, appealed to her, said, Jim O'Connor is extremely dangerous and we can't have him. We need your help. We need Trump's help. And so Ronna actually went to Trump and said, go endorse Gina Swoboda. So, it was, Trump doesn't necessarily know everybody that he's endorsing. I mean, how can he? I can't even vet the people around me. I can't imagine, how you can't expect anyone to make good endorsements nationwide and to actually know anybody and be making those personally himself. So, but
I think his plate is a little full.
Yeah. And, just my experience here and researching all this just gives me so much more respect for Trump and what is up against him.
And I will say, Gina has an impeccable reputation when it comes to her work on election integrity. So I don't know Gina, and I want to just make it clear, I don't know Gina. We've had a couple email back and forth when that election happened in December, because she came out and made public her opinion. And so I did email her and gave her additional information that I felt she didn't have in making her decisions. I didn't make that public because I believe when you have a situation, you try to work it out. I would, if I hadn't tried to resolve all of this stuff that you're looking at right now, I wouldn't be talking about it. Right. At one point, I had a group come to me and want me to run against one of my Republican legislators. And I said to them, as much as I don't like that legislator, I won't do that, because we don't need to spend our money in taking out a Republican. We need to spend our money getting Republicans elected. So even though I think he needs to go, it's not the right time and it's not the right place. Yeah. Right. And this goes back to what DeWitt did. Okay. When you're in leadership, he's in leadership of the Republican Party, the whole party. His job is to get good candidates, good Republican candidates at the right place in the right position. That's what they were doing with trying to put Lake as a governor. She could have been a good governor, right? She could have gone from governor to something else, right? Instead of just from the news station to VP. I mean, that's a little unrealistic, okay? I mean, she didn't have any background. Trump, he had incredible background. He could go from TV star to president because he had such incredible background. Kari didn't have that, right? And so DeWitt's job was to get the right candidate at the right time in the right place. Yep. Okay, that's his job, and he did it well.
Yeah, for sure. That advice there that DeWitt was trying to pass along, and this wasn't from DeWitt anyways, but that advice back in May that he tried to pass along, whether it was from Trump or from someone else, it was very, very good advice. I mean, there's, like you just said, I mean, it clearly would have been to Kari Lake's advancement. Just like with DeSantis, had DeSantis not run for president, he'd be so much more popular right now. His chances for 2028 would be so huge had he not run for president. And this is the same kind of thing. Had she stepped down from Senate and endorsed Lamb, she would have been really a hero and really committed herself to other candidates. She would have proved herself to be a selfless servant.
Yes.
That's what she would have done. It would have.
And look where our Republican Party would be right now.
Exactly.
If she had done that instead of what she did do.
Absolutely.
Right. We'd be looking at a totally different ballgame.
Yep. And
the right thing.
There's only one person that decision that I can tell that person really, or that decision to stay in the race really benefited. And that's Caroline Wren, because she is just raking in millions in her fees off of that she skims off of every dollar that Kari Lake raises. And so, it's just, I think that, and I'm going to continue to harp on that because I would, Caroline Wren, if you'd like to talk to me about it, I'd be happy to have you on my show and talk to you about it. So, all right. So what happened? Because this is, I think it really gets even more interesting and kind of juicy when we look at what has happened and difficult to discern, I would say, what has happened since that January election when Gina Svoboda became the chair.
Well, DeWitt resigning. DeWitt supported me as the LD3 chair. Okay, and when he resigned, and Gina Svoboda moved into that position, I got to give her kudos. What would you do if President Trump called you and said, "Step up," right? So she stepped up. She gets kudos for that, sure. Right? But she already had a full-time job, and that was election integrity. At that time, she was working for 3 different organizations that I could identify, or that were identified for me, right? One of them, the legislature, she's no longer working for, but she's still getting. She's one of those pay-per-play people. She works for another political organization, and anyway, I'm not going to go that much further into that, but.
We were talking about that last night with Sheila Muehling that actually came up. It was the Restoration for America, which, yes. Yeah. So go on.
So she's got a tough job. There's no beating around the bush. But her leadership skills have failed miserably here, because her attitude is, yeah, not my problem. Yeah, I have no authority. I have no authority to make any decisions. So I'm just here, and she's really just putting her total focus on election integrity. Thank you, Gina, for that, because we need it. We truly need your work there. But she hasn't really brought anyone in to assist her to run the AZ GOP. And so, and she's called a meeting, and she's decided she's going to sell the building. There's some history there. Her organization rents a good portion of the building that was purchased by DeWitt. I know DeWitt supported her. I'm not going to go there. Okay. So, she's now going to sell the building, and she holds a meeting with the executive committee. She doesn't really give them the information they need to make a decision to sell the building, and she just kind of ramrods that through. Okay. At that meeting, there were chairs there who wanted to question her because she was not supporting the vote of the XCOM to support me as the LD3 chair. She was just doing nothing about it. She'd stripped the website of all legislative districts, so no one knew who we were. And my name was on the AZGOP website as the chair of LD3. And so she took all of that information down. And she said she's conferred with attorneys, and she has no authority over anybody. And, she might be right about that, right? But what she has done is we have a state convention coming up, and we had to have a delegate election in all the legislative districts. Historically, the AZGOP has worked directly with the districts in getting those elections handled and managed and brought to the state convention. And Gina has decided, well, I don't have any authority. So for the authority I don't have, I'm going to give that authority to MCRC to make a determination, who is going to be the ruler of LD3. Oh, and by the way, right after her election, the O'Connor people so upset with her that they filed an election challenge on her election. And, oh my gosh, all of a sudden, as Gina Swoboda decides that the Gomez gang and MCRC are going to take charge of LD3 for the state convention, oh my gosh, that election challenge just disappears.
Yep.
You decide.
Yeah.
You decide what that means. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
So, I as I said, I don't know Gina. That's all I know is I'm looking at all the facts. And it doesn't look good. It just doesn't look good. And everything points to Gina being part of it. Right. You decide. It's not up to me to make that decision for you. In all of it. The Kerry Lake, Jim O'Connor, Berlin Bush, all of them. You look at it. You get into the history. MCRC has passed a resolution. They're going to be having tribunals for all PCs who don't walk their walk. And because of that, I started if you'll let me mention, I've started a precinct committeeman legal defense fund, because MCRC has literally removed a precinct committeeman in LD8. The treasurer of LD8, doing his job was reconciling the books, and the chair of that, LD, didn't like it. So he submitted removal paperwork to Chairman Berlin. And Berlin sent that to the Board of Supervisors, and this elected precinct committeeman was removed from his role as precinct committeeman.
Yep, and the chair of LD8, that is Ray Michaels. And Ray Michaels is actually the one who proposed that resolution to form tribunals, and immediately that MCRC meeting, immediately before, this could just be a coincidence, but immediately before proposing that, he was announcing that Mike Flynn was going to be coming to town on his bus and movie tour, his campaign for president, and he was endorsing that, telling everybody to go out and check out Michael Flynn, and then he proposes immediately, like the next breath, he proposes this tribunal. So that's Ray Michaels. So what you just shared, though, this legal defense fund, I think that this is a great idea. We're going to be including the link in the show notes for this show. And so what is the link if for somebody that's listening?
Well, I don't know off the top of my head, but it's a Give Send Go, and I think it's Give Send Go / hold on one second, and I will.
Okay.
My mouse to work here.
So while you're doing that, Lauren says, again, Christina Caramo did this when we had contention on 2 counties. She just stripped them all from the website. And she's saying that she can't take a side, and yet she's taking a side, and so, my message just would be the same as my message to Turning Point. I mean, Gina, now, Chair Swoboda, it's not a mystery that there is a real problem within the party, and that problem is on the side of Shelby Bush and Craig Berland, Jim O'Connor, that entire crew. And these are not the kind of people that you could just coexist with in the party because they want to destroy the party. And so if you're going to sit back and try to coexist with them and just think that the problem goes away and say, yeah, there's division within the party and hopefully we all just get along, you're just going to make the problem worse. So, I would encourage you, Chair Swoboda, to actually get involved and bring about a constructive solution. You should give Candace a call. She's been trying to get a hold of you.
Yeah, she doesn't return anything.
Yeah.
So that link is givesendgo.com/defendPCs. And so, my heart and soul is with the PCs. And that's my goal every day, is to, provide sources and opportunities for PCs to help get Republicans elected. And when PCs are attacked, I mean, we have this PC who's been removed, and now he's personally a volunteer precinct committeeman is personally having to sue the Board of Supervisors and MCRC. This is not acceptable. Volunteers cannot afford this. Lawsuits are not cheap. You know, a lawsuit will cost you about 30 grand. That's just your side.
Right.
Okay. I mean, in the last year between LD19 and LD3, there was probably $120,000 in legal fees. Do you think that $120,000?
Which is the crazy thing, because they keep saying, well, this is about, you got to get rid of all the rhinos. But when you examine their actual actions, their motives, just like at the very beginning, you know, in order to discern truth from falsehood, you got to look at the evidence itself and not listen to the narrative. Yeah. And so, you know, when you actually examine the evidence, it becomes pretty clear that those who are accusing people within the party of being rhinos are the actual rhinos.
Exactly.
And so it's very understandable that anybody looking into this from the outside could be so hopelessly confused that they would just throw up their hands and just say, I can't, I don't even know what's going on. It's terrible. Whatever it is, it's terrible. And so what else would you like to share?
Oh, I'm seeing on my notes here. Well, I guess I think I've pretty covered everything. The one thing I do want to reiterate is that Gina Swoboda keeps claiming to everyone that the bylaws do not give her any authority. However, she seems to think that she has authority to delegate her authority to MCRC, even though she says she has no authority. And it's absurd, just absurd. And the one last thing that that's really important to me in my heart, right? Because this is for every single person who's listening. If you're involved in this or you start to see it happening, you have to ask yourself these questions, right? Does the behavior, does the action do anything to get a Republican elected? That's the question you ask. When your tinglies go up and something doesn't feel right and it doesn't make sense, or you start getting emotionally upset, you ask yourself, does this do anything to get Republicans elected? If the answer is yes, go for it. If the answer is no, turn your back and say next. Move on.
Sure.
The second part of that, any situation just like that, you have to ask yourself and you have to listen to your heart and your soul and your gut, right? Is something they're asking me to do violate my moral compass, right? Is it just even a little bit off? Because it all starts with a little bit, and a little bit, and a little bit. And it's like when you talk to Basil, it started off right here. And then he's like, yeah, I don't want to be part of that anymore. Okay. And we see a lot of that happening, a lot. So the moment it starts to question your moral fiber or the rule of law, because everything we're talking about today, everything that MCRC has done, Gina Swoboda has done, in terms of the Republican Party, is they have moved from the rule of law to the rule of man. The rule of law, this is what our country, our Constitution, this is what we're based on, is the rule of law. We have 3 pillars of our government. One of those is the judicial branch. It's the law. What do we see happening right now with Trump? Right? They're taking the rule of law and turning it into the rule of man. And this is exactly what MCRC has done. They're taking the rule of law and they're saying, oh, no, that's not what it really means. Their bylaws say that they have the authority to rule on a question of bylaws. Well, they've taken that little sentence and turned it into, MCRC, I'm going to come in and I'm going to call a meeting and I'm going to take out your chairman. And they have no authority to do that. They did that to LD4 and they did it to LD26. Okay. And they did it to me.
Yeah.
Okay. The difference is I said no, and I didn't put up with it. Okay, so I'm still standing. But the moment you see them twisting the rule of law to fit their narrative, you know there's something wrong. And that's when your spidey senses come up. And when that happens, you got to step back and say, what's happening here? Am I getting Republicans elected or not? And that's how you make your decisions, because this is a very difficult environment to navigate. I'm going to read you, and it's really important. It's really important that you understand this and you're able to see it, because I'm going to read you a quote from Sun Tzu. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb to every battle. If you know yourself, but not your enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer defeat. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. And with that, every day you get up, you do everything you can do to get a Republican elected, and the rest is up to God.
Yeah, absolutely. Candace, that was awesome. We went pretty long here. If you're still with us, just we applaud you. But I think that this was we covered so much ground, and I'm so glad that you came on. And there's plenty for your enemies to try to use against you and me and whatever. But they've been, in so doing, they're just going to prove us right. Yes. And because they'll be using their tactics, and they're just going to prove us right. So so thank you so much. And we got some hand clapping here from Blood Red Elephant. So this was great. Thank you all for joining us. And until next time, next week, I just want to say next week is just a huge week. It's actually, this week was amazing. We really went on a blitz in Arizona. Next week, I'm going to have Mark Lamb. On Monday, I've got Garrett Soldano, who ran for governor in 2022 here in Michigan. I was on his show on Monday, and it was huge. We got just a huge response. He runs the Grassroots Army, so his market is actually the grassroots, the people that have been the target of this psyop, and he's trying to reach in and affect them, and help them out, which is just doing that with your own audience is just so challenging. And so I really applaud him for that. On Tuesday, we're going to be looking at another solution called Delegates for Trump here in Michigan. And that's going to be really great. So it's just going to be solution oriented, talking about a program that is part delegate recruitment, part training, part get out the vote, and just hands-on, getting involved with the party and getting people involved with the party and having fun and doing so completely outside of all of this conflict. And then I've got Solomon Yee. We're going to do 2 parts next week. He is the RNC committeeman from Oregon, and it is astounding what we've got there. Just amazing. He is an incredible human being. He was just removed by the disruptors. He's still in the RNC until the end of the term, but he's got an incredible story. He's a dissident from the Chinese Communist Party, and so he just has the stories that he's going to be sharing in both of part 1 and part 2. We've discussed what he's going to be sharing, and I can't wait. Some of it I haven't heard yet. I can't wait. It's going to be really good. And then I've got Mark Lamb on Wednesday, Sheriff Lamb, who I would love to see all y'all in Arizona elect for the next Senate, because he is the only candidate who actually wants to win the general election. And I think he would make a great senator. We need another sheriff in the U.S. legislature for sure. So with that, and there's more that hasn't been scheduled yet. We've got a great audience, but there's just so many heroes that have been so hurt by this and have risen above it, like yourself, Candace. And so I just appreciate that you continue in the fight and that you're just continuing to try to do what's right. And there is no perfect person, but you have been such a target, and you're working even to this day on persevering. And so I applaud you for that. Thank you all. And till next time.